So James McGlathery's article on Beauties and Beasts looks at several of the different tales. Some that we'll look at next time are those of the brother and sister tales, in which the brothers are transformed into animals. And it's through women that these males become civilized, whereas he puts it, the subhuman creature that has the potential to become a man is worked into a potential suitor, or sometimes a seducer. In most of these tales with the beast-like husbands, there is a crisis of the wedding night or marriage, that there is a threat in the form of what may have been, for many people at the time, their first sexual encounter. And in the brother and sister tales, the animals that they are transformed into are not as threatening. So they're birds and fawns. So they're more, they aren't put into that same category. But if you look at something like Little Red Cap, then you have the wolf. And the wolf in this story is a symbol of a voracious sexual appetite, chasing after our young heroine. And it's really a mockery then of the wedding bed scene that we see, where she's replacing her grandmother, where she's now is standing in for her as the head of the household. And the wolf does not transform, however. He doesn't become good in any way. And in our animal suitor tales, these beasts actually do transform, and they turn out to be in some way good after all. So we can see this dilemma play out in The Frog King, and the princess is forced to overcome her revulsion and fear of the suitor. It is a story of putting away those childish things like playing with a ball to learn to replace that relationship that she has with her father with this unlikely suitor. And her outrage turns quickly to revulsion as the frog keeps pursuing her. Other animal suitors include Donkey Skin, who, much like Hans the Hedgehog, reveals his humanity after the bedroom scene. And in our Italian tales by Basile, one man is a snake, hardly hiding the metaphor at play in these animal suitor tales that we find. Now, it's a little bit different with the little hamster from the water. Those other animals are somewhat threatening or repulsive. With the little hamster, that's not the same. We have here a princess who is still hanging on to her childhood, still playing hide and seek, and not ever wanting to be at risk of losing. So she plays with men who come to court her, and only really wants the one suitor who is unable to be found. It's sort of a catch-22. But we do have an exception being made for the younger brother. So we know already that she kind of likes him, and therefore he gets a couple extra chances. It's also interesting to note that where he hides and can hide are in animals or places that could be considered domesticated like himself. And each represents a liminal space in which he could emerge in a new form, like transformed into the adult male that she would appreciate. So for example, we have the raven's egg. It's a sign of fertility and maturation, so change in birth, just as the belly of the fish is a sign of maturation, this liminal space inside emerging from that, the belly of the whale. And then finally, he appears to her as a cute little hamster, a companion she keeps close, spends time with, and would never consider a viable suitor, but he is in her hair. The items that are used in hiding are symbolic for the rite of fertility that courting is wrapped up in, whether that is the egg of the fish or within her hair. The princess is also frustrated in her inability to spot him, looking through 12 windows and then breaking those windows, until she recognizes that what was right under her nose the entire time. So his non-threatening demeanor has allowed him to get close, to become a confidant, and he never tells her his secret, how he was unable to be found. In essence, he used magic to cheat so that instead she thinks him clever and her equal. So in the end, she finds what she cannot find, her equal who is not her equal. So with King Thrushbeard, however, we have the haughty princess who is averse to agreeing to marriage and a role in which they give up their freedom. As we can see, they're forced to experience a form of humiliation that breaks her down psychologically. This is presented in these tales as a part of maturation, as part of overcoming pride. But the means employed to break down the individual often read as incredibly violent today and abusive. In our tale of King Thrushbeard, it is a bit like a revenge tale in that the suitor, a king, is one of the many who are mocked by the haughty princess. As a punishment, her father insists on her marriage to the next beggar as a way for her to learn to be humbler. In her new station, she exercises a lot of self-pity since she still considers herself a princess. What can be seen here is that despite the constant critiquing of the minstrel husband, she does become somewhat successful at selling pots. And she has become agreeable, and even with the loss of status, she is eventually returned to her station, now with an appreciation of other perspectives, particularly those of the impoverished that she had no knowledge of before, really. And the structure of these tales of the haughty princesses is that through their humbling, they become more understanding and accepting of their suitors. So now we have a bit of a different type of story with the star coins and the spindle, shuttle, and needle. The trait of humility there is also very emphasized, and it becomes the most valued trait possible. The domestic sphere reproduces the values of the middle class, in which service is an underlying structure upon which the rest of society is built. So in the star coins, obedience and humility are taken to the extreme of martyrdom, which will be rewarded in heaven. And here the metaphor turns into earthly rewards, such as masses of coins. Just as in the spindle, shuttle, and needle, there is the favorable appraisal of humility, and both tales emphasize that hard work will attract the best mate. Especially in the case of the spindle, shuttle, and needle, all do the work for the young girl in the cottage, bringing back the suitor in the amorous admiration of her undeceived by her dress, but enthralled by this other quality of workmanship. In the tales for this week, the wealthier and more superficial the beauty, the more dangerous and deceitful the suitors are in winning their hands in marriage. Whereas for the already humble and industrious, the suitors are drawn by something supernatural that captures their attention and hearts, leading them to rewards that are not of this earth, or bringing their wish for a suitor to them. So in our tales, it stands to reason that a princess was reluctant. A wealthy woman did not have much to gain from a marriage to a man who would dominate her, limit her freedom, or control her. Even in tales that are romanticized, the beastly suitor, the apprehensive and initial fear that dominate and directs behavior, mood, and attitude is only compounded when considering the isolation and helplessness of the princesses to decide for themselves while they are sort of kept captive there. In many of these tales, there is a sadistic pleasure in humiliating the women or in prizing their obedience, servitude, and ability to work unceasingly. All the while, superficial beauty is projected as one of the most important qualities for the bride-to-be, a kind of dangerous beauty that sends many suitors to their death until one of them gains a foothold through deception, abduction, or luck, hardly providing foundation for long-term committed relationships. So as we have seen that there are two types of beasts, animal grooms, who make life unpleasant for our female protagonists in the form of frogs, bears, hedgehogs, and other creatures whose persistence eventually succeeds in wearing down the defenses of the distanced and uninterested princesses. These suitors then transform into handsome young princes, and there are those who would appear to be legitimate princes also, but they turn out to be beastly on the inside. And for them, there's no change possible. And those were mostly those suitors that were part of the horror and violence themed tales from last week.